The chamber was built to make men feel small. Its walls curved inward with deliberate geometry, the metal surface absorbing sound, light, and dignity alike. Commander Elias Cade stood at its center with his hands bound behind his back, boots planted shoulder-width apart, posture relaxed in a way that annoyed his captors far more than defiance ever could. He had been stripped of his rank insignia, his weapons, and his command, but not of the habits earned over 30 years of war. Across from him, the alien observer unfolded himself from a resting posture that suggested superiority was not merely believed, but assumed. He was tall and narrow, his body composed of layered, translucent tissue that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent veins. His species had no word for interrogation in the human sense. To them, truth was something you reached into and removed. "I am Archivist Threx," the alien said, his voice bypassing the air entirely. The words appeared directly in Cade's mind, crisp and precise. "You are the senior surviving commander of this theater. Your thoughts will conclude this conflict." Cade lifted his eyes slowly, studying the being in front of him. He felt the familiar pressure behind his temples, the warning sign every human officer had been trained to recognize since first contact.
A probe.
A shallow one, testing the surface. "You're late," Cade said aloud, his voice steady, almost bored. "War's been going on for months. If you could really end it with a look, you would have done it already." Threx regarded him with something approximating curiosity. Humans often reacted with panic when they realized what he was. Fear spiked the mind, loosened mental structure, made extraction effortless. This one showed no such response. His thoughts, on the surface at least, were orderly. Too orderly. "Your species is inconsistent," Threx replied. "Individually fragile. Collectively stubborn. You persist beyond statistical projections. That anomaly ends today." The pressure intensified. Cade felt it like cold fingers brushing the outer walls of his consciousness, sliding along memory and emotion, tasting without yet consuming. He did not resist. He had learned long ago that resistance advertised fear. Threx entered carefully at first, skimming the upper layers. He encountered procedural memories, formation drills, tactical maps, command protocols. A lifetime of discipline, cataloged and categorized. Efficient. Predictable. Beneath that lay emotion, muted but present, grief filed away behind regulation, anger compressed into focus, loyalty sharpened into something almost weaponized. The alien paused. This was not how prey minds felt. Most species fractured under inspection. Thoughts scattered. Identity blurred. Humans, however, arranged themselves. Cade's mind was not a storm, but a fortress with its gates open by choice. "You are trained," Threx noted. Unusual, but irrelevant. He pressed deeper. Images surfaced. Burning cities under alien bombardment, soldiers moving through smoke with practiced precision, a younger Cade standing over a tactical table while casualty numbers scrolled across a screen he refused to look away from. There was pain there, but it was contained, shaped, carried with purpose. The alien felt it brush against him like heat from a sealed reactor. Threx adjusted his approach, narrowing his focus towards strategic memory. He wanted fleet positions, defensive thresholds, hidden reserves. He reached.
And stopped.
There was a boundary. Not a wall exactly. More like a pause in the architecture of thought, an intentional space where something waited. Threx hesitated for the first time in his long service. He had never encountered a mind that acknowledged his presence so clearly, without collapsing. Cade met his gaze then, a faint smile touching the corner of his mouth. "You should know," Cade said quietly. "We figured out you could read us after the first colony fell. Lost a lot of good men before we adapted." "Adapted?" Threx echoed, already pushing against the boundary. The moment he crossed it, the temperature of the mind changed. The orderly layers gave way to depth, vast, compressed, and heavy with accumulated experience. Threx felt the weight of human history not as images, but as pressure, a species forged under scarcity, predators, disease, and endless internal conflict. Survival wasn't an instinct here. It was a philosophy. Threx recoiled instinctively, but the connection held. Not tightened.
Simply maintained.
Cade inhaled slowly, centering himself the way he had been taught long before aliens ever existed. He had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but hope was a luxury commanders learned to abandon early. "You wanted to know how to end the war," Cade said, his voice calm, almost sympathetic. "That means you want it inside my head." The alien felt something shift, subtle but undeniable. Attention. Focus. As if the mind he was exploring had finally turned its eyes fully on him. For the first time since his species had mastered thought itself, Archivist Threx experienced a foreign sensation. Uncertainty. And somewhere deep within the human mind he had entered so confidently, something vast and patient stirred, aware at last that it was no longer alone. Threx attempted to withdraw, not in panic but in calculation, the way one steps back from an equation that has revealed an unexpected variable. The mental boundary he had crossed did not resist his retreat, yet neither did it release him. The connection remained intact, stable, as though maintained by an architecture he did not control. Inside Commander Cade's mind, distance lost meaning. Memory did not unfold in sequence, but in layers, each one compressing against the next. Threx felt himself surrounded by impressions rather than images, pressure, endurance, intention. This was not a chaotic mind shaped by instinct. It was a cultivated one. He observed human warfare as Cade had lived it, not as isolated battles, but as an unbroken continuum of adaptation. Loss was not an endpoint here, it was data. Each failure was catalogued, refined, and fed forward. Threx felt the echo of decisions made with incomplete information and carried anyway, because inaction was often worse than error. The sensation unsettled him. His own species avoided such risk by reading outcomes before acting. Humans advanced by acting first and surviving the consequences. Threx pushed deeper, seeking the core of command. He found it in restraint. Cade's authority did not originate in dominance or fear. It was built on responsibility, so heavy it bent the mind around it. Threx experienced moments where Cade chose to hold a line knowing it would cost lives, not because it was optimal, but because every alternative cost more. The weight of those choices pressed into the alien's consciousness, and for the first time, he understood leadership as burden rather than privilege. A surge of emotion followed, anger, fierce and controlled, not directed outward but inward. Rage tempered into focus. Grief forged into vigilance. Threx realized with dawning unease that humans did not purge destructive impulses. They disciplined them. "This is inefficient," Threx projected, the thought carrying strain he did not bother to hide. "You carry unnecessary suffering." Cade's response was not verbal. It was a memory. A training hall filled with young soldiers, all male, all too eager. Cade stood before them, older, already marked by years of command. He did not promise survival. He promised clarity. He taught them that fear was a tool, pain a signal, and discipline the difference between the two. Threx felt the memory lock into place like a cornerstone. "You survive because you endure," Threx concluded. "No," Cade replied, finally answering in thought. "We endure because we choose to survive." The distinction rippled outward, altering the shape of everything Threx perceived. Human resilience was not passive. It was deliberate.
Designed.
Cultivated across generations that expected hardship as a constant rather than an anomaly. Threx tried to isolate strategic information again, but every path led through context, through cost. Fleet formations were inseparable from the lives they protected. Defensive lines were memories of where humans had bled before. There was no clean extraction here, no sterile data divorced from meaning. The alien felt something unfamiliar constrict within his own cognition. A narrowing. His mental processes slowed as he attempted to reconcile what he was experiencing with what he believed possible. His species viewed thought as territory to be explored. Humans treated it as ground to be defended. Deeper still, Threx encountered the oldest layers. Not memories of technology or spaceflight, but of firelight and darkness, of men watching the horizon for threats they could not name. Generations of vigilance pressed forward, each one reinforcing the next. Humanity had not evolved away from fear. They had integrated it. Threx faltered. His presence, once invisible, now felt exposed. Cade's awareness brushed against him again, not aggressive, not curious, simply present in a way that left no doubt of intent. "You're looking for weakness," Cade said, the thought calm and measured. "That's why you won your early wars." The alien felt the truth of it resonate. His species had thrived by identifying fear and exploiting it. They ended conflicts before resistance could solidify. It had always been enough. "Humans don't break the way you expect," Cade continued. "We bend. We adapt. And when we can't do either, we hold." Threx attempted one final push toward the deepest center, driven now less by mission than by the need to understand. What he found there was not madness or savagery, but containment. A vast, restrained potential held behind layers of rule, law, and self-imposed limitation. Not because humans lacked the capacity for destruction, but because they understood it intimately. The realization struck him with the force of revelation. Humanity was not dangerous because of what it did in war. It was dangerous because of what it chose not to do. The pressure inside Threx's mind intensified as incompatible frameworks collided. His neural patterns strained, struggling to process a species that survived by mastering its own darkness rather than denying it. He felt his thoughts begin to fragment, not from attack, but from overload. Cade felt it too, the subtle tremor of imbalance on the other side of the link. He did nothing to exploit it. He simply remained present, unyielding, a constant the alien could not escape or ignore. "This isn't over," Threx projected, though the confidence was gone. Cade's reply was steady, almost regretful. "It was over the moment you thought understanding us would be easy." As the connection held, stretched taut between them, Threx realized with growing dread that what he had uncovered was only the outer layer of something far deeper. And if he remained much longer, he would not be able to tell where his thoughts ended and the humans began. The fracture came quietly. Threx did not feel pain in the way biological organisms understood it, but there was a distortion, a misalignment within his cognitive lattice that signaled imminent failure. He tried to compartmentalize the sensation, to isolate the foreign influence, yet every attempt only reinforced the connection he sought to sever. Cade sensed the shift immediately. Years of command had trained him to recognize collapse before it became visible. He did not press forward. He adjusted, studying his thoughts, anchoring the shared space with deliberate calm. Panic would have destroyed Threx outright. Cade had no interest in killing him. The alien struggled, his presence flickering, his once precise mental voice fraying at the edges. "You are violating protocol," Threx projected, though the concept of protocol had lost its authority here. Cade offered no rebuttal. Instead, he allowed Threx to see the structure beneath the surface, the rules. Not alien law or imposed hierarchy, but human constraint, layered and reinforced across centuries. Codes of conduct, chains of command, moral frameworks designed not to empower, but to restrain. Threx was forced to confront a revelation that unsettled him more deeply than any display of violence could have. Humans did not lack destructive capability. They feared it. Not the enemy's, but their own. The shared space shifted, becoming more focused, more intimate. Threx found himself drawn toward a central construct, a conceptual chamber Cade had kept sealed. It was not guarded by force, but by intention. Entering it required acknowledgement. "This is what you don't see," Cade said, his thoughts steady and unadorned. "What we lock away." The alien crossed the threshold. He was met not with chaos, but with clarity. A distilled understanding of what humans were capable of when survival stripped away restraint. Threx perceived strategic annihilation calculated without hesitation, cruelty executed with precision, and adaptation so rapid it bordered on inevitability. There was no pleasure in it. No malice. Only function. Threx recoiled, his mental form destabilizing. "This is unacceptable," he projected, the concept of ethics warping under the strain. "This is extinction." "Yes," Cade replied. which is why we don't live there. The weight of that choice pressed into Threx's consciousness. Humanity had glimpsed its own potential for devastation and chosen to bury it beneath laws and empathy, beneath culture and cooperation. Not because they were weak, but because they understood that unrestrained power devoured its wielder. Threx felt his certainty unravel. His species evolved beyond such dilemmas by externalizing judgment, by reading minds, eliminating threats before they matured. Humans had internalized the threat instead, turning vigilance inward. You thought we were inefficient, Cade continued, that we carried unnecessary suffering. But suffering taught us where the line was. The aliens' thoughts splintered further as incompatible truths collided. Human limitation was not a flaw to be exploited. It was a safeguard, one that could be removed under sufficient pressure. Cade allowed Threx to feel the implication without dramatization. If humanity was pushed beyond survival into extinction, the rules would cease to matter. The restraint would fall away, not in rage, but in resolve. Threx perceived himself shrinking within the shared space, his presence diminished by the enormity of what he now understood. He had not discovered a weakness. He had uncovered a boundary condition, one that redefined the entire conflict. Why show me this? Threx asked, his projection thin, strained. You gain nothing. Cade considered the question, and in that pause, Threx felt something distinctly human. Hesitation born not of doubt, but of conscience. Because you came looking, Cade answered. And because if you're going to decide our future, you should understand what that decision awakens. The shared space stabilized, the pressure easing just enough to prevent collapse. Threx clung to coherence, his once flawless cognitive discipline in tatters. He understood now that humanity's greatest defense was not secrecy or strength, but self-awareness sharpened by restraint. The alien felt himself pushed gently, inexorably, toward the edge of Cade's mind. Not expelled, not attacked, released. The act carried finality, not cruelty. As the connection loosened, Threx grasped one last truth with stark clarity. Humans were not dangerous because they sought dominance. They were dangerous because they knew exactly how far they could go and had chosen, every day, not to cross that line. The link began to unravel, leaving Threx suspended between worlds, his certainty destroyed and his mission irrevocably altered. And as the human presence receded, one thought lingered with devastating persistence. If restraint was the only thing holding humanity back, then survival was the only thing required to remove it. The moment the link severed, Threx collapsed. His tall, luminous frame struck the floor of the chamber with a brittle finality that echoed louder than any alarm. The bioluminescent veins along his body flickered violently, then dimmed to an unstable pulse. For several seconds, nothing happened. The chamber, designed to dominate silence itself, seemed to hesitate. Cade exhaled slowly. The pressure behind his eyes faded, leaving only fatigue and the familiar ache of responsibility. He remained where he was, hands still bound, posture unchanged. Control, he knew, was as much about what one did after victory as before it. The doors irised open at last. Alien attendants rushed in, their movement sharp with alarm as they surrounded Threx's fallen form. Their minds brushed against the residue of the psychic rupture, recoiling almost immediately. None of them dared to look directly at Cade. What occurred? One projected, the question fractured by fear. Threx stirred, attempting to rise, then failing. His mental voice, once pristine, emerged fragmented and raw. Do not touch him. The command stunned the chamber into stillness. Cade watched without expression as the alien attendants hesitated, then slowly backed away from him. Whatever Threx had carried out of the human mind was bleeding into the collective awareness of his species. The certainty that had defined them was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous to an empire built on psychic dominance.
Doubt.
Threx struggled to focus, his perception warped by the aftereffects of contact. He is not defective, he managed. He is contained. The word carried weight. Containment implied capacity. Potential.
Threat.
Cade was unbound moments later, not as an act of mercy, but necessity. The devices restraining him had been keyed to psychic compliance. With Threx compromised, the systems failed. As Cade rolled his shoulders, regaining circulation, he felt the subtle shift in the room. He was no longer prey. He was an unknown variable, an unknown's unsettled species that relied on certainty. News traveled quickly through alien channels. Fractured impressions spread from mind to mind. Human endurance, deliberate restraint, the terrifying implication of what lay beneath it. Telepathic species across the fleet began reporting interference when probing human prisoners. Some experienced disorientation. Others withdrew entirely. Within hours, the interrogation stopped. Cade was escorted, not dragged, to a holding chamber that lacked the oppressive geometry of the first. He was given water, then time. Neither was accidental. The aliens were reassessing, and reassessment was the first step toward negotiation. Threx was present when the talks began, though diminished. His presence no longer dominated the room. His gaze avoided direct contact with Cade, not out of fear alone, but respect edged with something like caution. "You have altered the strategic equation," Threx admitted, his voice subdued. "Your species cannot be safely examined." Cade met his gaze evenly. "We were never safe to underestimate." Silence followed, heavy with implications neither side wished to voice outright. Conquest relied on predictability. Humanity had just removed itself from that category. The alien leadership did not retreat. They recalibrated. Occupation gave way to armistice. Demands softened into proposals. The war did not end in triumph or surrender, but in pause, a halt driven not by defeat, but by uncertainty. Cade was returned to human lines under truce conditions, his presence alone enough to quiet the battlefield. Word spread among human forces, not of victory, but of leverage. For the first time since the invasion began, the future was not being dictated to them. In the quiet that followed, Cade stood alone, watching distant stars through reinforced glass. He felt no pride in what he had shown the enemy, only resolve. Humanity had survived by understanding itself, by knowing when to hold back and when to stand firm. The galaxy now knew that too. Somewhere beyond the hull, alien minds adjusted to a reality they could not fully comprehend, a species whose greatest weapon was not its fleets or its technology, but the discipline to restrain its own power. Cade turned away from the stars, already thinking in contingencies and outcomes. Peace, he knew, was never permanent, but neither was fear. And when the galaxy eventually tested humanity again, it would not be ignorance that met them, but choice.